relating is a fundamental principle of life. And there are different ways to express interest, motivation, and care in relationships. And there is, generally speaking, I think there is a difference of how a more masculine-oriented person, which men often tend to be, and a more feminine-oriented person, which women more often tend to be, but it can also be vice versa, are going about that, or like sharing their concern, or showing their concern and their motivation. And so women, or the feminine, is definitely more interested to work for the relationship directly through contact and bringing themselves in and sharing their emotions. And that's exactly often the place where then there is this kind of concern, or also like criticism on men of not showing up enough. And in that place, I think it's important to see that also what makes some men not show up doesn't mean that they're not interested, but they're actually trying to show their care and concern for the relationship in different ways, in the classical sense of like how they maybe provide, how they create stability, how they actually not involve themselves in emotionality, because that's a place where they might feel they unconsciously provide stability, or even very consciously wanting to provide that, is also, or can be seen as a way that they want to actually support the relationship. But it might not happen through direct contact, but more through creating a space or creating a material environment for the relationship. And of course it's valid, or like healthy for the relationship, if both partners can also bring in their emotions and their vulnerability and their inner world into it. Yet very often also men are not, have not been trained, or maybe not even invited very much to develop that quality in themselves. And often even when couples come together, there is kind of like an appreciation, or even a request on the masculine to provide stability, monetary income, and things like this. And so I would say if somebody comes in, and I've seen this often like in couples, where then maybe the feminine or the woman, the feminine person or the woman kind of has this kind of demand or need, or even the blame, like, oh, he's so cut off, he doesn't care, he's not interested in the relationship, where I would say, okay, let's look at this, but before we go there and see what's lacking, can we also see where there maybe is a genuine care and interest and motivation for the relationship, but maybe the lens through which you look at this does not provide you what you want to see. And so I have these kind of rules with couples that if you want to give feedback to the other, in a way coming in with a request to change for the other, which is always a difficult place because none of us like to be changed by somebody else. So I have this rule that you always come first with appreciation and respect. So that's like first respect, and then you can bring in your demands or your wishes. So if you cannot come and see actually where your man or your partner is actually bringing something to the relationship while he's doing that, it's very difficult then to demand another step from him, because we all are much more motivated when we feel respected. And there is a kind of a cultural tendency right now to kind of bash the masculine because it's not emotional enough, it's not available enough, and all of those things might be true, but there are maybe things where somebody needs to be invited into practice something that men often, as I said before, have not been practiced, or like they haven't been practicing this so much. So I would say it's first of all important or good to see that it's not just a fundamental disinterest in relationship, but first to see, can you see other ways how your partner is actually trying to provide and support the relationship? And maybe it's in very different ways than you would wish for it. And still it's there. And that's kind of like builds a foundation that you both feel, yeah, I might not like exactly how it happens, but there is like a base for the relationship. And then the other thing is also for a man or more masculine oriented person, that there is really something to learn. And that has to do with kind of learning something that maybe you're not so familiar with. And I kind of like to say that most men kind of lack just practice and flight hours in the emotional and relational realm, that men have a tendency and also have been kind of culturally shaped more to look for solutions through practical things, through action, through doing something maybe to get ahead, but not through coming together and share their inner world. So if you've been growing up as a man or as a boy and becoming a man, you're maybe just not used that you can that you're not used to that you can actually solve problems, which every relationship brings, by bringing your inner world into contact. And I think there we also touch something quite important on the male psyche, that men don't like so much to be in a place of not knowing something, or even feel a bit ashamed or insecure when they come into an arena where they are feeling more like they're kind of beginners again, and where the other partner is kind of more well trained. So, and then if this stays unconscious in relationships or in couples, it can be that the man in the relationship kind of by instinct, even because it feels uncomfortable and it feels unknown, like shies away more and more from the places where the woman wants him to share or to speak about his feelings. And I think that's something that both partners kind of need to understand and can recognize if they want to learn how to build a container that is welcoming for the feminine principle, but also welcoming for the masculine principle. And that man really, there's something to learn, but there's also something to learn from the masculine. So there's not only just men now have to catch up with women, but both have to kind of see each other for what they bring by their essence into the relationship. And I've seen this many times in long-term relationships where a couple have been together and they maybe created a lot of stability, maybe had kids already that are growing up, they had built a house, created a company or project, like there's a lot more stability, and then one of them kind of develops more, what we would say in personal development, in inner work. And then naturally this kind of maybe drifts apart, and then there is a tendency from the feminine or a woman, and in that case, to kind of demand from the man, now you have to change as well, and you have to get to know my world. And I think in that moment, while it's true again, like if it's an invitation, it's great, but if it becomes a pressure and a demand, it can become really a locked place where the man feels suddenly pressured to be something that he doesn't know if he even wants that to be, and also feels criticized for things maybe that were very valuable at the beginning of the relationship. It's like I felt like I've been chosen, and it was good to provide and to not be moved by my drama, so I can work and be a stable place. And suddenly now I should be different. And it's very disorienting for men if they don't have like information orientation about these processes. So everybody who's been a lot in workshops or personal developmental trainings or things like this, or even in therapy, probably seen the phenomenon that in average there is like 1/3 of men and 2/3 of women sitting in the room, and it's like a constant almost throughout these kind of events. And there's always the question in the room, so why is that? Where are the men? And it's a question I really hear a lot from women. So we're working on ourselves so much, and where are the men? Where are the good men? And I always feel a bit dissatisfied with the quick answer of like, yeah, it's because men are less evolved and they're not interested in this kind of things. And I don't have a full answer, but my feeling is that this points to something else also than just a stereotypical answer that, yeah, it's women are ahead and men are just behind. It just doesn't cut it for me. So when I'm having conversations with people, or what I see is also, I think there is something really also to learn how inviting our spaces like this really also for the masculine essence. And so I've been working with men and men's groups and like in the men's movement for many, many years, and I see there is a big interest. Men are coming and they're wanting to come, and they have a hunger and the lust and the desire to actually come in and really learn how to share from their hearts and share their power with other men. So I don't think it's because men don't want to be in spaces like this. And maybe for some men it is also really threatening, because again, it's not a place they have been trained in, and having had a real experience of like, this is a good space for me to enter. This is a good space where I feel I can show up with everything that makes me me, and that really burdens me on the inside, and it makes me kind of also struggle with things where they maybe feel they come in and they have to actually hide a part of themselves. And I've seen it or heard this also from men, even in going to couple therapy, that they feel like when we enter the office, in a way I already know I had lost. So I had already to kind of bring myself in a way that it would please my wife or it would please the therapist, and in a way that's really a sad story, because it means there is something that stays then really out of the relationship, and it would kind of even then kind of confirm the assumption of like, yeah, men are just not interested in relationship because maybe there's also a place in themselves where they don't feel invited to really share what's really for them, what's happening in their inner world. And that's like, again, like it's a two-way street. It's a responsibility of the man to really find that place and really bring it in. And there is also a question that we could ask for circles like this and workshops that are inviting men and women, especially if it's around relationship issues. Is it welcome to, or are the men, and not just men in their physical bodies, but is the masculine that they represent really welcomed in a space like this? Because of course, and I've known this myself, and I've been in this world for many years, there is a tendency to kind of now go to the feminine and to balance the kind of ultra masculine, driven, goal-oriented, kind of harsh, successful, young, hard young energy in the world. So we go to a group like this and it kind of feels, finally we can relax, we can rely a bit more on the feminine. And then there is a bit of a, I would say almost like putting the feminine on the altar, and the masculine doesn't quite know if it's okay to be on the altar as well, or does it have to stand on the side. And as understandable as that is as a kind of like a compensation mechanism in the culture at large, let's say, or like a rebalancing, it also has, I think, many side effects where, especially men that are really more strongly masculine identified, or like masculine types, don't quite know if there is a place for them in there, and if that would threaten the harmony or the values that are kind of like implicitly then happening in such a group setting. So in my own experience, I've seen that the more I've worked with men, it also kind of brought in mixed groups of men and women. It brought more men in, and I had to really also understand deeper in a way how to welcome and speak to the male psyche that actually really cares. Because what I see very much is when you really look at how much men care. And we all know that there is a lot also where the masculine, the unconscious masculine had like brought a lot of pain and violence and destruction to the world. So that's clear, we're not debating that. But that doesn't mean that there is not also an aspect of the man or of the masculine that really wants to contribute, that really wants to learn, and they really want to offer something. And if there is not a space where this is welcomed, it rather goes out, and then it recreates the cycle where then we can have like a confirmation of like, yeah, of course, the men are simply not interested and they're just not up to it and not conscious enough. And so I would say what this kind of conversation leads to is not a discussion of like, so what do we need? Do we need more of the masculine? Do we need more of the feminine? And who needs to lead now? But more of a question of what are the unconscious aspects of both sides of the polarity, and what are the conscious aspects of both sides of the polarity, and that we simply need both. We don't need more fragmentation or polarization. We need more space that can really recognize, welcome, and draw out the conscious and essential aspects in both men and women, in the masculine and in the feminine. And I think there is something we as therapists, workshop leaders, people that hold spaces like this can also really have a good reflection on ourselves. So how welcome is the masculine when it also shows up, especially in places maybe that are not so comfortable, maybe that are challenging, that are painful, that makes me even go to places that are painful or difficult in myself. And I think that's the place to really learn. And I think there is a natural magnetism that will draw in men. And one thing that I've seen in places like this, that from women, there is an immense appreciation when men actually take on and embody the masculine they really feel in themselves, not as a performance, as a show off, but when they really allow themselves to really bring that in, maybe feel it also like as a brotherhood among men, that it's supported, that it's not a fight between men for the women, but something that brings them together. When that comes into the room and when it comes into a relationship, that there is an immense appreciation of women for that. So we're not asked as men to become better women. We're not asked to compete in that, but we're asked to become real, and from that place to learn what we have to and can learn from women. And there is truly a lot to learn.